Hello and welcome back to Hill with Ty and Kara. Today we're going to be talking about liminal space, and I'm going to let Kara kind of take the lead on this, and then I've got a few things I would like to discuss as well.
All right, welcome back. This is the third episode in our little series about Hades and Persephone and how they teach divine masculine and divine feminine energies. And the first one we talked about Hades as representing the divine masculine and Persephone representing divine feminine. And yet they are in their unhealed versions of themselves. So Persephone's been living in this toxic feminine state where she actually takes on those toxic masculine features, just like we do in society today. Overwork, overproduce, perform, try to be what everybody else wants you to be, try to force and control outcomes, right? And keep everybody else around you happy. And Hades is kind of hiding in the depths. He's got this helm of invisibility. He doesn't want to be seen. He's like F you to everybody in society. He can't stand the other gods' morals and values. You know, he just feels like a loner, a lone wolf, which is not a bad thing, right? He understands what he wants is far more and in far more depth than what the world and the society is offering, and so he just kind of is isolating himself. Though they're both in like toxic, unhealed states. So, in the myth, Hades opens up and kidnaps Persephone, and we talked last week about how that wasn't just a random event, and that wasn't the beginning of Persephone's story. That was like her dark night of the soul. And all of us through our healing journeys at some point have to face our shadow. We have to face all of the things that we've been hiding, all the hard things that have happened to ourselves, our wounds, our toxic traits, our bad habits, and kind of be forced to look in the mirror at ourselves and understand what all of the things, all of our patterns, all of our tendencies to avoid our pain, our trauma, and not heal it, not face it, has created our reality by the actions and habits that we set every day. And so we face this dark night of the soul. She gets taken to the underworld to face her shadow and face the reality. And so the idea of this liminal space is also built into ancient teachings, and the liminal is the space in between. So we talked about Shakti and Shiva, or yin and yang, last week as well, and that Shakti dances in Shiva's sacred container, right? Shakti is that electric, chaotic energy. Shiva is the protective containment of that chaos. And the universe is the blank space where they dance. Or like yin and yang, you have the masculine and the feminine balancing each other out. It's never a 50-50 split. And each one holds the seat of the other. So it's an ebb and a flow of, sometimes you're going to have to hold more space for each other. Sometimes you're going to have to do more. Sometimes you're going to have to receive more. And it's a beautiful harmony. It's not an even 50-50. And so the liminal is this really this space in between where your old identity, your old self, your old habits, you finally have awoken to realize that you can't live like that anymore. You don't want to be that way anymore. You don't want to live that life anymore, right? So you're leaving that space behind, that identity behind. Even if you've worked your whole life for that identity and that goal and that purpose with those people, you realize that, fuck, I'm going to have to throw it all out. I can't do it. It's not aligned anymore. And so now you're just in this space where you're like, well, now what? Now what? I can't, obviously we're going to go back to the daily habits of just doing that because that's where we've been. And so it's going to take a little time to transition out. But you're too awakened to the malalignment of that to just ignore your higher self's telling you that you can't keep doing that. You can't keep going on that way, right? And so now you're like, hey, but now what? How do I can kind of see a glimpse of where I want to be. I kind of have this idea of a future, but it seems impossible. It seems out of reach. Like, it's like the caterpillar and the butterfly. Like, that caterpillar, if you told it was going to be a butterfly, it'd be like, you are insane, crazy. There's no way pudgy little chubby little me could ever sprout wings and long skinny legs and fly to unknown places. I'm meant to be down here on this leaf, eating away, minding my own business. Like, you would think that's impossible, and yet the caterpillar goes into this cocoon, this liminal space, and is completely transformed into this higher, beautiful creature, right? And so that's what we're talking about today, the liminal space.
Yeah, so in this space, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so the tendency, when you are in certainty, the brain will automatically go to what is certain. And so sometimes you'll go back to what you were trying to leave until you've ran into so many dead ends and roadblocks that you're like, you know what? I've got to make this change, so I have to face the uncertainty. And part of the liminal space that is actually a beautiful part of it is to find rest in the liminal space. So I have just a brief story. When I was about 12 years old, I was probably 11, 12 years old range, and we were living in California at the time. My father wanted to teach me a lesson, and he wanted to take me out to the ocean and just have me sit by the ocean. And he said, Ty, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to be anything. You just need to sit and let your thoughts be, let them exist. And I'm thinking to myself as an 11-year-old, like, why aren't we grabbing the boogie boards and like going in the ocean or whatnot? I was like so far from wherever my dad was in that spiritual level. But then he had me do the exercise, and I remember it feeling like this. It was an uncertainty about me. I wasn't sure how to balance that liminal space where he's teaching me about it. He's teaching me how to sit in it, how to reside in liminal space and not have to do anything but allow the space to exist and let the mind do what it needs to do, but not necessarily force anything or change anything, but just let it exist. And so I remember how uncomfortable that was when I first did it. But then we sat for a while. I bet you it was about 2 hours or so that we sat near the ocean. It was, of course, the ocean is beautiful, and the sound is beautiful. And so after a while, my thoughts started to kind of align and collect themselves as far as maybe things that I would, want to work towards, because that was something that my dad said. Eventually, your mind will start coming to a clarity on what you need to do next. And as an 11 or 12-year-old kid, I'm like, well, really don't know what I need to do next, but he just says, let it come to you, And it was a really cool experience. And so obviously from that time forth, when we would go and do that same exercise, I started gaining a lot more clarity about letting the process be, not necessarily forcing it, not having to do anything, but letting the process work, and letting me stay in that transitional period. And the beautiful thing about going is each time that we went to that ocean, there was a moment there of real clarity, because there was time to just exist, not have to do anything, but just sit in that uncertainty and embrace the uncertainty. And so I think in Persephone, when she was in this moment where she's in the dark night of the soul, she had to also embrace this uncertainty when she's going down with Hades. And I think that was a beautiful moment for her, a transitional moment, one that, she obviously in her life before, everybody was wanting everything from her and wanting her to perform at her highest level, and she was finally at a place where she had nothing left to give. So she went into this liminal space, this uncertain place with Hades, and it's such a beautiful transition. She didn't know exactly what the future would hold, and sometimes we don't, and it's uncertain, and so that can be stressful sometimes when our mind wants to know what the certain thing is. But if we can embrace uncertainty and be okay with a little bit of limbo, it's the way we can transition out of the old and welcome in the new, and that's a very cool spot. And that's something that I did learn too with my dad out there on those meditations, basically, is that liminal space is very valuable, and it's valuable to your mind and your soul, because you can come into a better alignment when it's quiet and there's not a lot of distraction. Your mind has a chance to become clear. But without that, without the liminal space, without the time to do it, sometimes we just stay in lives that we're not happy with. And it's that then we might miss our chance for transition, to get to this other side, this new place, So any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so a lot of thoughts. I love that, first of all, that you were taught that at such a young age, and I've seen you do it with us on our trips to the beach and teaching our young ones that same thing, is that, we gotta allow ourselves space to sit in and receive. And so yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And so the liminal space it's a protective space. Like, Hades took her down to the underworld where no one could touch her, no one could talk to her, no one can persuade her and force her back and try to convince her of their ways. That it was a very protective space. The cocoon is a protective space for that caterpillar to do its work, to transmute itself into a butterfly. So it's a very sacred, special place. And it can be scary because you're going to face the dark. You're going to face the shadow. You're going to face the pain, the things that you've been not wanting to face. But it's here where the magic is. And this space is where the healing takes place so that you can finally be free of it. And when you finally heal and free yourself of those burdens, it is as if you have wings, right? You are so much lighter. You are free. You are not chained down by your pain and all your coping mechanisms to unhealthily deal with that pain or hide that pain, right?
Exactly.
So in the myth, when Persephone gets taken by Hades down to the underworld, her mother Demeter is just distraught, like, oh my heck, what's happening to my daughters? You know, what has happened? This horrible thing. What am I gonna do? You know, and so she looks for her for forever and forever, trying to find her daughter to, you know, force her daughter out of her own healing work. You know, don't go down to the dark. Don't go to the liminal. Don't question any beliefs. Don't stop doing what we've trained you to do your whole life. You know, you need to come back. Where is she? Where is she? Right? And she goes to Zeus and she finds out that Hades has her, and they have an arrangement that Persephone's gonna be his wife, and you know, she's all upset. But before we go down that side of the myth, what I wanted to talk about here is that Demeter calls upon a goddess named Hecate, so to come and guide Persephone on her journey. It's like she finally understands, like, as a mother, I need to let my daughter go through this process of healing and allow her soul to come to its own alignment and trust in that process. But I'm going to call upon the goddess Hecate to guide her. And so Hecate is the goddess of the liminal. She is a guide, like a light in the dark, to help with these transitional phases of life. And she's not there to fix anything necessarily or change anything. She's like a light and a mirror almost, to help you understand, you know, kind of to help you make those decisions for yourself. Right? And just kind of guide you through that process. Kind of like coaches, therapists, mentors do today. They can give you some tools. A light is a tool. They can show you a path or a bridge, right? And just act as a guide, you know, but you have to do the work yourself. You know, a therapist or a coach or some healing guru can't do that work for you. They educate you, they teach you, they give you some tools, they shine a light, but the work has to be done by yourself.
Right, and I would imagine Persephone and Demeter had their own emotional journey as this was happening, right? Like, it's tough as a parent to let your child, who is maybe in that adult transitional state, let them make decisions and do things on their own, right? There's that anxiety that you go through. There's also this identity crisis as a mother or even as a father that you're letting go, you know? You go through some self-doubt, like, oh man, did I do well enough as a parent, right? So Demeter's going through a lot of these emotions, grief and loss. She's going through grief and loss of her daughter just being there for her, right? And she's now letting go and letting her go into this liminal space. And so she's like, okay, well, if I've got to do this. I've got to practice acceptance. And as I practice this acceptance, I'm going to give her that guide, which I think was very cool. That was a good point that you made. This guide that helps Persephone through the liminal space, and so now if we're looking at Persephone's emotional state, maybe describe a little bit like some of the things you feel like feelings-wise Persephone was going through.
Yeah, so a lot of times what happens when we're in these transitions, so first of all, sometimes we decide on our own, right? It's our own, frick, I can't do this anymore. I gotta do something different, and we begin that journey. Other times, somebody in our life does something that forces that journey, right? Let's say a spouse cheats on you, and all of a sudden, now you're at a crossroads, right? And you didn't expect it, right? Or maybe there's an unexpected whatever happens in life, right? That you didn't see coming, it just happened, and now you're faced with a totally different reality than what you had before, and you're like, well, frick, now what? So regardless of what it is, it's like an identity death. Everything you were and have been up until this point is like just not really you anymore. It doesn't fit anymore. It's just you've outgrown it, or it's just flat out not aligned. And so it can be you can have a lot of anxiety with this, because if that's not who you are, then now what? Who am I? Like, what do I do?
Oof, and that can be a scary question.
Yeah.
Right?
And so when I was raised in the LDS Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, if you will, and families are a huge part of that church, and it's a beautiful thing to teach the sanctity of families, right? And so from a young age, that's what we're taught, and we believe, we're going to grow up, we're going to get married, we're going to have a family, and so when I grew up and got married and could not get pregnant, my whole life, that's what I was trained and primed and, taught, right,
Sure.
to do.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so it was a huge identity crisis for me. And it was like, well, if I can't ever have a baby and be a mother, fuck, now what?
Right.
I was not saying the
F-bomb
at that time in my life.
I think the LDS
my
people
new
would
identity
be really upset
says
at you if
plenty
you said
of
the F word. Oh, man.
Anyways, but it was a big identity crisis in my life, and it was very emotionally hard, and like, who am I if I can't be a mother, right? And so I had to really work through all that, and really just take some time to first, like you said with Demeter, a radical acceptance. I have to have a radical acceptance of, this is my reality. For whatever reason, I'm not able to conceive. And yes, you could do adoption, you could do foster stuff. There's all kinds of things you can do if your ultimate goal is to be a mother. That's fine. But, what am I, gonna do? Who am I? And through that process of allowing myself the time and the space to ignore everything, ignore the church's stance, ignore the society's stance, ignore the tips and things and, advice that everybody has. Go into that safe space, listen, sit in that space like Ty said, and let your heart and mind align. Listen to your highest self, and you can hear the answers. And the answers that came to me is, there's more to me than motherhood. That was the crystal clear
beautiful.
message. There's more to me than motherhood. And so I remembered, oh yeah, there really is,
Right.
you know, and if I can't do that, there is infinite possibilities of what I can do, right? And so, long story short, we did in vitro, and we had a daughter, and then we had a little boy. So I became a mother, and now I'm a mother to 7 and 2 grandkids and 1 on the way. You know,
she's an amazing mother, by the way.
Thank you, baby. But it was really hard to go through that identity crisis, you know, and then more recently, I had to go through the big transition of leaving a community behind where I used to live and work that was very toxic and very malaligned, and take that leap of faith to go somewhere else. And it was really scary. And that leap of faith, though, like, I was faced again with a choice. You know, cycles repeat themselves. And, you know, karmic relationships come back. Your patterns repeat themselves until you heal things, or you say enough's enough, and you choose to walk away and rise above and do something different, right? And so I was faced with it was like so clear to me, this cycle is about to repeat itself. I have exhausted myself trying to bring it to light to other people, so that people with the power to put a stop to things, but they refused. And the cycle's going to repeat itself. I can either choose right now, this is a crossroads, this is a liminal space. I can choose to stay here and accept that this toxic cycle is going to continue to infinity, and I can choose to just live in it. Or I can say, enough is enough, I can't do this anymore. Which means I don't have a job, I can't pay my bills, I have 2 kids to raise by myself with no money. What the F-bomb am I gonna do? That's a scary thing. But I knew I cannot allow myself to continue this toxic cycle, right?
So that was
and so I made the decision to say,
uncertain,
fuck everybody and
right?
leave.
Yeah, that was a super uncertain and brave move. And I think, you know, in hearing that, just the bravery it would take to say, you know what, I can't repeat this cycle. I've got to do something different, and I'm going to at least give it my best go of trying to head towards this uncertainty. So
Yeah.
tell us a little more about that uncertainty, like embracing it.
Well, for me, it came with so many physical uncertainties, right? I had to quit my job, so I had no income. And it was in a very small, remote area where there are no other options, right? So
That's tough too.
and then I had to, because it's a remote area, I had to decide, where am I going to go? Which direction? I can go this direction to this city, or I can go that direction to that city. And I had to really think about my identity, my path, my trajectory. Where do I want to be? Where do I want to, not like a physical place, where do I want to raise my children, but in what energy and with what mindsets do I want myself and my children to be a part of, right? And so find the communities that have more people in alignment to what you want, right? You can't talk butterfly talk to caterpillar people. So I knew that if I go this way, that's where all the caterpillars are. So I'm going to go that way, because I may not have wings yet, but I want them. And so I'm going to go that way, where there's way more opportunity for me to evolve and become the person I want to be, and give that to my children, that gift to my children. So it's still, there's so many unknowns. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know what job I'm going to have. I don't even know how to stop at a fucking stoplight without, I'm a small town girl. I can't navigate a fucking city. This is scary. Right? But I got to go that way because I know if I go the other way, it's going to be the same toxic cycles. I don't want to go there.
Right.
So I made a leap of faith and went that way, and within a month I met Ty. You know,
that was awesome.
I aligned myself
Yeah.
on the path I wanted to be, even though it was full of unknowns. But I knew that, at least there's the opportunity for me to elevate myself to a higher consciousness, and that's exactly where I met my life partner, the love of my life, my soulmate.
Thank you, babe.
So it was awesome.
Yeah.
And that's when the real healing work started for both of us.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's when it shifted right into full gear.
It was like us. We love Hades and Persephone because it's very similar to what we went through, I feel like.
Right. Exactly.
So.
And yeah, that's why I think too, like speaking, from the Hades side of things and the emotional state there, right? Like we talked about, Persephone and her emotions, Demeter and her emotions, but I can definitely relate to Hades and the isolation.
Talk about it, love.
Because honestly, like I also was in a situation where my ex-wife, when we were married, was abusive to my children. She just was. If you've ever seen any versions of Cinderella, she was like the wicked stepmother, and then you got the daughters that are exactly like those daughters that were just rude to and just unkind to Cinderella, and and it was just, and I could tell it was hurting my kids, and it was hurting me because of that, right? And I would try to correct things or try to communicate what was happening, and it would fall on deaf ears, and she'd just take it personal, and then we'd get in these big fights because I wasn't being heard, and she's taking it personal, right? And then my kids are being hurt, and there was just one moment where I was going to some Christmas party, and I had an awakening moment where I walked in, and one of those daughters made a smart-ass comment the second I walked through the door, and I thought to myself, I don't have to tolerate this. And I turned right around and walked right back out the door, got in my car, and I never looked back. And got me an apartment, told my wife at the time, we're done, everything's done, and I went sprinting to my liminal space. So
See ya.
So yeah, and so when I hear about like Hades and potentially when you're with all those gods, for Hades, he probably felt the same way where, what, I am going to sprint to the underworld because that is where I feel like myself again.
Yep,
right?
It's safe.
And it's like, thank you.
You're not
for
being persuaded to participate in things that are not in alignment.
Right. So I have to admit, the apartment that I moved to was such a healing liminal space for me and my kids. And it was I think, a chance for me to fully embrace uncertainty, because I knew certainly if I stayed, I might as well just, it it just wouldn't have been good. There's
Yeah.
no good in that, in staying, right? And so I embraced that uncertainty.
I think some of us stay too long. Well, we always stay too long, but like
Yeah,
I stayed so long and fought so hard to change the perspectives of the people around me. I just exhausted myself. And like
well,
again, you can't talk butterfly, talk to caterpillar people.
you
They're not
realize
capable of understanding.
you realize the change isn't going to happen,
Yeah,
right? So
but I let them
like-
hurt me so long that my soul was ready to, like, I was going to die of a broken soul.
sure.
And people have done that many times throughout history. That is a real thing that happens. Like, I was there. My soul was ready to just float away on the breeze and I not exist anymore. Like,
Right.
I could not go on any longer.
Same. Yeah. And that's where, in the apartment, it was such a beautiful experience because I was able to relax. My children were able to relax. Like, no longer dealing with the blending stuff that was no longer working. There was no blending that actually was able to take place because they just wouldn't allow it. Didn't matter how kind I would coach my children, just be kind. Even if they're not being kind, just be kind. Just try to do your best, right? And they just continued to be unkind. And I'm like, no, I just can't do it anymore, right? So when we got to this apartment, it was a beautiful space for me and the kids to all have a place to take a breath. And it was almost like being at that beach again, where we had a chance to have quietness and stillness and just hear what we needed to do different next, right? What was going to come next.
You can just exist as yourself.
Yes. And
without
that was
anybody telling you should be doing this or you should be doing that or you should be thinking this way or that way or forcing you to do this or wanting you to do this or holding expectations over your head.
Right. And so
you can just be yourself.
The next thing I did that I think was helpful when I was in the liminal space is I did what I think Persephone also did, what I think Hades did, with Persephone as well, is, practiced a bit of self-care, right? So like, I remember going down to the power sports place. I found me the motorcycle I thought looked the coolest and I bought it.
That's his form of self.
And that was what I did. Now, this was before I met Kara, of course, so she probably would have wished I would have maybe waited, but not so
like
much.
You're
but,
saying your bike to go ride the bike, feel the wind in your face.
Oh man, the bike
freedom,
was a very good healing experience. Still is, still love the bike. But yeah, it was a great. That was kind of where I decided to seek, like, for something different, is when I went and purchased that motorcycle. I got my motorcycle's license. I started riding everywhere. I took that bike. You can go everywhere on like $9 in gas, right? So I literally went everywhere. I went to every lake. I went everywhere you could imagine. It was beautiful. It was such an amazing experience. And it still is. Every time I get on my bike, it reminds me of that it was a true vehicle to help me like seek like who I am, and that was awesome. It was a beautiful experience. And I know, like, as you think of Persephone going into this underworld and Hades also, like, they had to find the things that worked for them. And it couldn't come from, like you were saying, the churches or communities or even social medias or parents, right?
Your community's expectations.
It comes from you.
You don't fit in
From
any
the
of those
inside.
boxes anymore.
Yes, you had to seek it within yourself because it was already in there. I didn't know it was all that was in there. But as I started seeking within myself, I started finding what it is that I am, right?
Yes.
And that was so cool. And so, and then I was able to kind of stay present more often and enjoy the present moment. That was another beautiful thing that happened. So you think of like the four things, right, that Persephone and Hades were doing to not only navigate the liminal space, but also make good use of it. They embraced the uncertainty. They practiced that self-care that they needed to have in order to find themselves, right? That's the motorcycle for me, right? That was an important thing. And they had to seek within themselves what the answers were and have a quiet enough space to do that. And then focusing on the present moment and embracing what is, right? And that was, and it's just such a cool thing. And so
the divine masculine energy that we have within ourselves is what holds space. It's the boundary that says, I'm doing my protective work. I'm not going to force myself into all those boxes of expectations and whatnot. I'm going to allow myself this space. I'm going to allow myself to sit with myself. I'm going to allow myself to discover things about myself and remember the things that I love and the things that I am. Remember who I am. Remember what I like. Remember what I want to do. The masculine energy holds space for that and protects that and allows you that. The feminine is what receives that. You do the healing work. You just be. You don't have to do anything. There's no expectations. And the feminine is what starts that transformation. So like your divine masculine will hold the space and you'll start to get ideas come to you, right? The spark, the idea. And then your divine feminine within yourself, as you're sitting there, you start to get clarity on, okay, this is how, yes, that is me. That is who I am. That is what I want. Now the divine feminine me can bring that creation to life, right? Takes the creation and the movement and the energy and the flow and the rhythm, and now bring that vision to life. And so it's like that womb space too. It's like combining those energies, the spark, the idea, the vision, and starting to create it into life. And you allow yourself time and space to identify and set healthy habits and new goals and new places. You're not going to go do the same old things in the same old places with the same old people, right? You're going to start transitioning to the life you want and to the feelings you want to feel every day, right? And so that liminal space is the space you allow yourself to map that out and understand it. And when your nervous system starts to freak out because this is unfamiliar and it feels unsafe and it feels crazy that I could be doing something so wild and, crazy from what I was raised to do and what everybody thinks is going to be crazy and ridiculous, my nervous system's going to freak out. I'm going to come right back here to this liminal space and sit with it and heal it, use my tools to calm my nervous system and ground myself until I'm ready to keep moving forward, right? And I keep allowing myself that space to heal, ground my nervous system, and move forward.
And what I loved about what you were kind of alluding to there is the self-discovery that you're talking about, the creativity, like it allowed you a chance to create something new in which we were both in that space trying to create something new when we found each other, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if we wouldn't have ever done that, like, we wouldn't have gotten this new opportunity.
Yeah.
So that is what I think the message here, I think this is a good take home as well, is that, if you can allow yourself time in the liminal space, just like Hades, Persephone had to do. They had to experience, especially Persephone, had to experience time in the liminal space, and embrace that uncertainty, right? But when she embraced it and accepted it, right, then she had room for self-discovery.
Yeah.
She had
Map
room.
out a new identity for yourself.
And she had room to create something new and different with Hades, right? A new opportunity. So that is what I love about this liminal space is it gives us this chance to meditate, really think through our lives, think about directions we're heading, and decide, is this even where I want to go? Is the end result to the direction I'm heading right now going to get me to where I really want to be? And I would say if not, then deciding, right? Where do I want to be? Let your mind sit with that for a minute. Think on that. Give yourself a couple hours of letting the mind work through, what do I really want?
Yeah.
And am I aligned with that? And if I'm not, what would it take? And if your brain starts freaking out like you're saying, oh no, I can't do that, because that would go against everything and everyone. And, listening to your own soul instead of the noise, listening to your own soul in the quiet space, because when you think, where do our souls truly come from, I don't think we were left without a guide either.
Right.
Right. And
that.
our guide is within us. And that's a gift. That's something that's given to us, right? That guide. People call it source. People call it, in religion, they call it the Holy Ghost. I think there's lots of ways. The higher power,
and your
intuition.
Higher self
yes. But
those.
if you can go within, in that quiet space, that soul of you, that guide that you were given, that inner guide, eventually comes through, and you're like, okay, this is where I need to go. And it lights the way, right?
Love that. Yep.
So, and then you're on your way to a new opportunity, which, was such a cool thing, I think, for us. Because I remember stepping out of my truck for the first time when I first was meeting Kara. Obviously, the online dating stuff's a little scary, right? But I was meeting her for the first time in person. I step out of my truck and I look over and I'm like, and this never happens. Usually, like, when you see online pictures, you're like, okay, and then you see the person when you meet them and you're like, oh, they're not anything like these pictures, right? But the funny thing is, it was a little bit kind of like opposite. Like, I saw, Kara's pictures, and she has a couple pretty pictures on there, but it wasn't like,
I didn't use any filters. It was just real normal
it was just,
pictures.
Right. And so, like, when I got there and I stepped out of the truck, I look over and I'm like, whoa, like, she's gorgeous, so obviously, I'm shaking in my boots after that. But it was cool because that's what the liminal space led to for me, is her. It led me to her.
Yeah, for both of us.
It was awesome.
We allowed that transition, and it led us to this beautiful life we would have never been able to experience otherwise.
Right.
And I think, that day in the park when we first met, I had been doing that liminal space work, the self-care, the holding space for myself, giving myself opportunity to say, how do I want to feel every day? What kind of person do I want to be in this world every day? How do I want to show up? How do I want to live my life? I was allowing myself time to rest. I was allowing myself, spiritual growth and physical healing and rest. And because of that, I was able to be in a very peaceful, really feel good energy the day I met Ty. And I was just a confident energy, confident within myself. Like, I wasn't in this energy of, oh, I hope he likes me, how we often do in dating, or, oh, I hope I'm good enough. I was just completely happy and content and feeling good within myself, and I was able to meet him with that energy, and it was a beautiful first date.
It was. It definitely was. And thank you for that. Yeah.
So what's cool next week we talk. So when Ty and I met, we pray a lot to meet the one, right? We want to meet the one. When we finally meet the one, our lives will be complete, whatever. That's kind of a lie, because you can't, nobody else or no other thing can complete you. You have to complete yourself, right? What really happens when you meet the one is that it's an initiation into the freaking underworld. And that's when the healing really starts to happen, right, Chai?
Exactly.
So next week we're going to talk about what happened when poor Hades is doing his work that he's called on this planet to do. He's doing his work down in the underworld, and all of a sudden he comes face to face with his counterpart, and he is thrust into this, awakening himself. And so maybe we'll skip that one. No, just kidding. They come into union with their sacred partners, and that's when the real healing takes place, because partners are mirrors for each other, and they show you all the unhealed things within yourself that you are forced to face.
Exactly.
That's when shit gets real.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing,
and
is
there's fire and brimstone and all kinds of
right. Souls moaning and wailing, gnashing of teeth. No. But yeah.
That's when it gets real.
Yeah, after the honeymoon phase, you definitely you have some real stuff to face. But it's I do remember her saying something to me that was pretty significant when we did go to that space, though. She's like, you can heal all you want on your own, and you do a pretty decent job of it. But as far as relational healing, you can't do that alone. Like, you do eventually have to be brave enough to navigate a relationship, if you brave it, if you dare, right? and it does
takes you to your next level of healing.
And it's really the only way. I loved what you kind of said originally, is like, if we are gonna evolve as individuals, it's gonna take that, us facing what is hard within ourselves, that the mirror, which is my partner, shows me, right?
Yeah, so I think the way I put it was, we can only heal so much on our own.
Right.
And the rest comes in relationship. Right?
Exactly. So. Right. And so, we'll be talking a little more about that. And
that's where the story gets really fun.
Yeah.
And Hades and Persephone really start to heat up. It's fun.
Right. Right. And again, if you do like our show, please forward it on and continue staying with us and let people know about it. And we're excited about it. So
I love it. All right. Yeah, please leave us a review. That'll help us tremendously. And share on your social medias. Let other people find us. So thank you, and we'll see you next week.